Morning. The time is now 9:43 a.m. and a quorum of the board is present. The State Board of Ed meeting of October 11 is called to order. If we can have approval of agenda and the order of priority.
I move approval eliminating items B and J.
And I would like to ask that we, as soon as I get this turned to the right letter, that we remove item J, recommendation for bylaw change for the State Board of Education Legislative Committee. There's some things that have happened in the meantime that I'd like to take this back to committee and make sure we're ready to bring it forward.
That sounds good. John said B and J, and the J is also, or rather the B is also because we just need a little more time to understand. There were some issues raised yesterday that seemed to make sense, or at least need to be thought about before we bring it to the board related to some of that work. We're going to work with deans on that particular issue. So the motion, I guess, is to eliminate or remove J and B from the agenda. Otherwise, the agenda stands as is. And John moved that. Any second, please?
Support.
Support by Dan. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same. Thank you. I thought I would start to try to set a tone today. And this one, let me say first why I'm going to show this. It's because this is the first meeting where we actually have a new part of the family here at MDE, and it's the Office of Great Start. The Office of Great Start comes as a result of an executive order of the governor that, in effect, consolidated a lot of things related to early childhood and daycare, licensing, and things of that nature from around state government into this area. And there's different numbers I've heard, but some as high as 84 funding streams that have been mixed around state government or consolidated here now. And one thing I wanted to do, because with that comes really something I've known from all the way back to Ready to Succeed when some of us were involved in early childhood education 15 years ago. And I don't think she was in this role at the time, but the director of the Office of Child Development and Care Office, who comes to us from Department of Human Services and is now with us in the Department of Ed, is Lisa Brewer-Walraven. And Lisa, would you stand up and be recognized? And we just want to welcome you to the department. Thank you. So in this role, Lisa is the leader for Michigan's Great Start system to develop and implement policies that protect children and families and help them be successful and self-sufficient. Prior to this, she was involved in statewide early childhood systems planning efforts and served as the program director for TEACH, Early Childhood Michigan Project. She's been actively involved in early childhood field as a teacher, a program director, and a college instructor for over 16 years, and we're just delighted to have her here. And in the spirit of we think about ourselves differently now. The board's been well ahead of this long before we had this formal restructuring in terms of understanding that we're not just a K-12 organization. We really have to think about the continuum. I think some of the board that's involved in higher ed, like Cassandra, for example, understand that we're really now at a point where we have this responsibility for kids at an earlier age, but we're also trying to build the system to at least a pre-K-14 kind of system and maybe more. But in the spirit of the early childhood, I thought this might capture that a little bit about our new function. Okay, a little self-survey. My granddaughters, including the new one, just
What are you saying, Ella?
She's not biting the foot, so this is a good thing.
Do you have bigger sister on your lap? Say cheese.
I think we'll cut it off before my granddaughter on the left, Ella, and the newborn on the right is Avery, and Ella will be picking her nose in about 30 seconds. Cut it off there. But Judy and some others who congratulated us, I want to thank you. It is a great addition to our family. And in that same spirit, you know, we thought the MDE family is a growing one itself with what we just talked about with Great Start. We weren't sure that the board all had as kind of a sense of pride that we wear here in the department, and want to make sure that each of the board members have, you know, our MDE
I have so
lapel
jewelry.
some more jewelry.
No, he says he has so little. Yeah, very nice. Very nice. Didn't know we had these.
We have them now, and thanks.
Bless you.
Some are allergic to them. They have a compound in them.
Yeah, what did you do to this one?
But appreciate your efforts together as a board and an MDE team. Thanks to
Thank
you.
you.
So, Marilyn Mertz, as Zoe says. I say Mertz.
Just
but
pick a name.
Please, introductions, that part of our meeting.
Good morning. I'd like to introduce you to members of the State Board of Education and people around the board table. To my immediate left is Mike Flanagan. He's the Superintendent of Public Instruction and Chairman of the board. To his left is John Austin. John Austin is the President of the board, and he resides in Ann Arbor. To his left is Cassandra Albrich, the board's Vice President from Rochester Hills. Nancy Danhoff from East Lansing, she's the board secretary. Kathleen Strauss from Detroit. Next to Kathleen is Paul Gobensky. He's this year's Teacher of the Year. He's from Oakland School's Technical Campus in Royal Oak, and he is a teacher in business, marketing, management, and technology. Across the table is Eileen Weiser, member of the board from Ann Arbor. Next to her, Dan Varner, board member from Detroit. Next to him, Richard Ziley. He's the State Board of Education NASB delegate. He resides in Dearborn. And this is Mary Ann McGuire, the treasurer of the board from Detroit. Thank you.
We have a pretty interesting agenda today, and it starts with a presentation on what's called the Governor's Decision Room, and it's in the Michigan Historical Center. And I'm going to turn this over to Nancy in just a second. The Governor's Decision Room is a unique learning opportunity that will place high school students right in the middle of historic governmental decisions that have shaped Michigan. It's part of the David and Betty Morris Learning Center located in the Michigan Historical Center, and it's part of the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. And Nancy, if you'd like to introduce our guest. You asked for this to be on.
Oh, okay. Thank you. First of all, let me say that I had the distinct pleasure for probably 6 years to be on the foundation board for the Michigan Historical Center. And one of the things I learned while I was there is that the people who work there have a keen and focused interest on making certain that we can connect for all of Michigan's citizens, but certainly our children, the reasons why the Michigan history are so acute, not only at the time that they happen, but at today, and how we live, and how we do our work, and how we continue in what we call the state of Michigan. And so I have a very great appreciation for all that they have done. And when Pat Clark from the foundation, the executive director there, came to me and said, we have a process, our new program that we'd like to bring to the board and show how closely this aligns to what the board's work in their content expectations, how this aligns so well, and how well that young people can be a part of this. I was thrilled. So this morning we have Mark Harvey, who is the state archivist, here today to explain to us how this great decision room works. And I'm wondering, the only question I have is, do you often meet with the governor now to make sure that he's following your protocols? And no,
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming. I appreciate
Thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk to you. Briefly, there's two handouts that are going around. One is an overview brochure of the program. The other is a sample page from the handbook that's a deliverable to the classrooms. The Michigan Historical Center, just to clarify what Nancy said, we work in partnership with the Michigan History Foundation. They are our 501c3 partner in lots of our education programs, so they do a lot of fundraising for us. support our programs in that way, and they make things like this decision room program possible. We've just completed construction on 10 new education spaces in the Historical Center, so we're really excited to ramp up our offerings when it comes to education programs. The capstone of that is the Governor's Decision Room program. So briefly, what this program does, and we've piloted it with a couple different classes already and want to really open it up in January of 2012, it is based on a program at the White House Decision Center, which is part of the Harry S. Truman Presidential Library and Museum. They partnered with us because they really wanted to take this program they developed over 5-6 years and move it out into the state. So Michigan is the first state in the country to do this program at a state level, and they have partnered with us, and then we worked with area teachers as well to localize the content at the state level. There are 3 in-class modules that students will participate in, and they get an overview of the civil rights era, they learn about the roles and responsibilities of state government, and then they also learn some skills for interpreting and reading primary documents. After they do those 3 in-class modules led by the teacher, they come to the Michigan Historical Center into the David and Betty Morris Learning Center, which we've constructed specifically for this program, and they embark on about a 3.5-hour program where they are assigned roles of the governor and his cabinet. They conduct press conferences. They are given documents in advisory groups as the events unfold, and I'll talk about the actual event in a moment. So they're getting information in real time. So they have to employ critical thinking skills and decision-making skills as they go through this process, because they don't know what's going to come next, and they have to react to that. And at the end of the program, they have to decide a course of action, and that's what the one handout is it guides them, because they do have handbooks that guide them through this whole entire program. And this is an example of some of the final decisions that they could make to deal with the situation. And then they have to defend that in front of a press conference. And all the students in the program have both a governor or a cabinet member role, but they also have a press corps role. So while they're not in front of the class defending the decision, they're acting as a press corps member asking questions as well. So the actual topic that we've started with is the Detroit riot from 1967. And the reason for that is, in consulting with our focus group of area high school teachers, all of them felt unanimously that that was an area that they just didn't have enough concrete materials to draw from to do a meaningful interpretation of that era. And I don't know whether that was the textbooks that they were using or what have you, but they all had a consensus that that's what they wanted to focus on. So we picked this topic because of their wish to cover this more completely. In doing so, we have some wonderful records from both the Archives of Michigan and the Bentley Historical Library that we've used, so that they are getting the actual telegrams to Governor Romney and other communications for this program. So we're excited to deliver this. The next program we'll be working on in summer 2012 is the labor strike from 1937. So we will be covering different eras in this program. I wanted to share with you, we have a very short trailer, basically in the guise of a movie trailer that we have created for this program that we've been sending out. I'll be speaking at the statewide Social Studies Conference on November 4th about the program, just to promote it and get the word out. I think I can navigate back to it. Okay. While we're waiting for this to load, I will say that in addition to the Michigan History Foundation, we partnered with Jackson National Life, the David and Betty Morris family, and we also are partnering with Steelcase to outfit all of these education spaces. So we're really excited about that. We seem to be having technical difficulties.
Well, while we're waiting, I'm excited to see that you're using this topic because I actually just finished my dissertation on the 1967 riot/rebellion. Basically, I say that because I use media framing as the basis of it. I went to the Johnson Presidential Library, and I have a number of materials that I would be happy
That would be wonderful.
to unload.
Yeah, in addition, I mean, we haven't gone to that level, but if you have materials that we could incorporate, that would be wonderful. Because the wonderful thing about the on-site program is it's not part of the pre-printed handbook. So we can change it up so that if the same class comes year after year, we can mix it up a little bit so it's not the exact same experience. We're also working with Yale University because the Cyrus Vance papers are there, so I don't know if you work with those as well, but okay, that's...
Yeah, I went through all the
Oh, she got it. Oh, you got it in the
Yeah.
So, one qualification, this is done in the guise of a movie trailer, so if it seems slightly sensationalized, it's because it is. I want to get it to full screen. There we go. And
I've lived through it.
A long, long time ago.
On Detroit's Commission on Community Relations at that time. I remember going to a meeting the next Monday morning, driving down the Lodge Freeway, and felt like on the beach there were no cars and just smoke coming up.
well, and it's been an interesting process developing. So one of the things we did was I did an oral history interview with Bob Danhoff, and that was just him telling me about getting dropped off on a rooftop by a helicopter, and it's just fascinating. So I think one of our main reasons for being here today is just to communicate to the board what we're doing and to impress upon people that we're not a field trip. We develop programs in conjunction with the state guidelines, with the GLICs and the Huskies, and we take time to do that so that we can offer meaningful programs to students so that their visit is more than just a field trip. It's an educational experience. So, thank
Questions
you.
from the board? Nance?
Just
Comment?
a comment, I think. I think one of the things I found in the classroom, that working with young people, is we can all, as human beings, we can all second guess what decisions were made at certain times in history, from our family history to the world history. But when you actually are confronted with things in real time, without all the information behind you, without all the background, without all of the I wished I'd known then type of things, and having to make decisions at the moment in the best way possible, suddenly democracy, liberty, all of those things that we value become so much more real and so much more clear as to their fallacy and to their best, the best part of those things as well. And so I really appreciate this opportunity to give young people the chance to experience that, because I think oftentimes we don't get that chance until we're in the middle of it, and gosh, I wished I really thought this through a little better.
Right.
And so I think that really gives some skills to our young people that they wouldn't otherwise have. So
Right. This program, our goal is to make civics tangible in a very real way, whether it's this content or other content.
Sure. Absolutely.
Other board members? Dan, please, and then Kath.
I want to So I love history. And think that the study of it is tremendously important, enlightening, frankly, to be placed back in situations like this, I think can be kind of a wonderful training ground for all sorts of things. I'm a little troubled only by I don't know anything about the Michigan History Foundation, Board of Directors or anything else. My concern really is just around making sure that as you delve back into these spaces where folks have, frankly, some sensitivities, right? I mean, these are difficult moments in Michigan's history, generally speaking, that you'll be diving back into, that you do so with a real deliberate focus on racial equity as a lens
Absolutely.
to go back into it.
And we did that in consultation with those 3 area high school educators. We were very sensitive to that as well, so we made sure that we covered every aspect of it. So this is not, and I think that's one of the other exciting things for us, is that this is not your traditional top-down look at the civil rights era. It encompasses all sorts of different perspectives and presents those to the students in a way that they haven't had before. So I feel confident that we've done that, and I understand the apprehension or questioning of that, but I feel confident that we've addressed that.
So it's great to hear that you have that confidence and I feel like you've done that. I would just offer just a quick check on that. So even something as simple as calling this the Detroit riot, I would argue is evidence maybe that hasn't gone far enough. This could easily be called a civil disturbance. And there is a significant narrative in play from others in the community that this was much less a riot than it was some kind of a rebellion or protest. And regardless of where you land on it, the point is that finding a term for it that is a little less pejorative, just a little more objective, so as to allow folks to reach their own conclusions about what that event might have been, who didn't live through it, right? So these are kids for whom this is...
Right. And actually, I should have shared the first part of our handbook, because the very first exercise the students are given is a Venn diagram with riot, protest, and civil unrest. And they have to decide how those are defined. And then they carry that with them through the program so they can make a decision on what they think this is, so that we haven't predetermined that for them. And I realize for the trailer itself, we call it the governor's decision room, and I may have incidentally put that in the word riot in the description, but we don't portray this to the students as the Detroit riot program.
I wondered also, in the scenarios, it's the Detroit riot in '67 and the '37 labor strike. And it's an issue because that's the common name for it. So
Well, and
I
that-
recognize you're trying to
And that's right. We had to make a decision of identifying the actual event, whether we think that term's... there's considerable debate around whether or not to use that term. So.
I so struggled with this when I was writing my dissertation because no matter what you say, you're buying into whatever frame it is that you're talking about. The Kerner Commission actually used the word uprising, which I think, was kind of a middle ground at the time between the riot or a rebellion and, was a little more in the middle, I would say. It tried to not label it on either extreme. And so, you might want to just take a look at the Kerner Commission report
Okay.
and how they described the incident. Because I think at the time, I can tell you all the documents I went through in '67, they're all, Dan's point is very important because they're all written from a very specific perspective, with very few exceptions. And so I think if you're sharing materials from 67, that makes a lot of sense because they're historical documents, but keeping in mind that they are written from a very definitive perspective.
I think Kathy was next, then Richard.
Yeah, I had much, was going to say much the same as Dan said. because- Oh, I was going to say much the same that Dan said, because I think you have to be very conscious of the way people react to the word Detroit riot. And it's not positive. You know, people resent that it is called, that it's referred to as Detroit riot.
Mhm.
And they refer to it, people I talk to, as civil disturbance. And I'm so surprised that this is the thing that you're focusing on. It's kind of, I was taken aback when you said that. That's what you're going to focus on for your first exercise, so to speak. Is that what is to teach about civil rights, the civil rights movement?
It's
Which
to
is
talk
so
about
different from that one
the
event.
goal. Again, the goal of the actual program is to engage students in an actual event that we have primary resources for, that we can give to them in real time so that they can make their own decision about what happened. And again, this was done in consultation with a broad spectrum of teachers, and this is what they chose, and we let them guide us. They're the ones that are in the class teaching the material. We wanted their input to use that. It's not that we didn't consider that this is a sensitive subject. It's not that we didn't look at the term riot versus unrest versus protest versus uprising. At a certain point, for the literature that we were passing around to not students but to educators, the teachers and we agreed with them, felt that you had to identify the event by what it was most commonly known. If the board's suggesting that's not the best idea, we certainly will revise that, look at it, reconsider it. It was not done without any forethought.
And just, if I may, before Richard, thinking out loud, that we'd be happy to kind of be colleagues in that respect too here at the department. There may be some folks that could be part of that team that you have assembled with some teachers, if you'd like, on future projects.
That'd be wonderful.
Even on this one.
I do think that it's very good to get the students involved with this kind of discussion, because it would bring history and civics alive, and we have not done a good job of teaching civics, so we get better involvement of people in the elections and everything else.
In our 2 focus classes of students that we ran through the program, none of them were even aware that the event happened. So, again, that underscored our desire, and we're talking about 25 students that had no idea, in all different levels and competencies, that had no
Richard,
idea.
Then Eileen, then Mary Ann.
Well, I appreciate the challenge of shifting from a traditional approach to history, which tries to take a universal, everybody's perspective in consideration versus what it looks like on the ground. And when you start off with the governor's office, obviously you're going to assume a perspective and a whole set of categories and interpretations, which is unavoidable given this approach. But my question is, did Dr. Otto Feinstein have anything to do with this?
With the program development?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Is he still alive? I thought he died.
Because it sounds an awful lot like the sort of seminar that he used to teach and advocate at Wayne State, and of course, so I just thought his name should be thrown out in connection with this approach to student education, where they assume different roles and essentially turn a historic scenario into a simulation.
Yeah, we're not saying this is a brand new concept, but our goal is not to just teach Michigan history for the sake of teaching Michigan history, but to tie it into the national story, which this allows us to do.
Yeah. Eileen?
I think one of the challenges that you face is that as far as catastrophic events that require
our decision-making, unless you go back to the pre-governor structure in the invasion of Michigan through the St. Lawrence Seaway. You don't get much that requires kind of decision-making. I mean, we haven't been invaded for quite a while, although it certainly did happen. We just didn't have a governor at the time who happened to be a Michigander. So I recognize, there are states that have had, look at Australia. Australia was invaded or had the submarine off the coast that shot things into Melbourne, or I forgot all the northern cities. But you look at what you have to use, and it does center around people and civil rights and employment rights. So, if there were other events in Michigan history that would have involved this kind of statewide resources, thinking we have forest fires, but most of them haven't threatened enough of a community to actually fight them in a meaningful way by the governor's office. But I think that was the only other thing that I would throw into it is there anything else to use? These two moments in Michigan history are uncomfortable, but you can include, I would think, under the list, more discussion about the rights of the people involved in both than may have been discussed at the time.
Absolutely.
So, and that's an interesting point to make with the children, is that there are biases that we walk into in a crisis that color the decision-making.
Absolutely.
And that one of the things that we have now at our fingertips with the level of technology that we have is much more ability to gather information thoughtfully to make the decisions if we're willing to do that.
Right. Yeah, the first module, I think, does a good job of addressing that. It's not without, room for improvement, though. So.
Thank you. Mary Ann, please.
I just wanted to say thanks. I'm really happy this is happening. And what I was wondering is it possible to have access to any of the materials without actually visiting the room?
At this time, the program is developed to include the on-site. That is part of the program, is to include the on-site visit. So that's part of the experience. We've geared that fourth module around that experience. So to not have that included before we've even started, currently that's not an option. It's not to say that wouldn't change in the future, but
I think that would be very helpful to think about that and keep for the future.
I just want to follow up on Mary's point. One of the problems with the schools now is they don't have money for field trips. That's one of the things they cut. They don't have buses, or they don't have the money, or
and that's one of the wonderful things of working with the foundation. Michigan History Foundation is our partner. We can get corporate sponsors for busing grants to be able to, because one of our big concerns were, the schools in Detroit metro area might, some of them might not be able to afford that, and that would be, not okay for those students not to have the ability to learn about the situation.
Is there anything in here that says funding available for field trips?
No. Again, this is a brief discussion piece for this particular meeting. It's not our wide.
Just for the, okay.
Yeah, it's not been distributed past the.
Let teachers in schools or principals know.
Absolutely, and at the conferences we've been linking with the Wayne County RESA and some other of the ISTs, so that we're getting the word out that way.
Oh, that's good.
Eileen, Dan?
I would just add that the Detroit Historical Museum has done a spectacular job of overhauling their collections and trying to become more well-placed with Southeastern Michigan students. And one of the things that you might consider in the future is whether busing costs more than setting up a second area.
Absolutely.
Because that would be spectacular.
We've done something similar. We run the Big History Lesson, which is a week-long. The museum becomes the classroom. Well, the Grand Rapids Public Libraries come to us and ask us to develop the program for them, for West Michigan. So we'll have precedent for doing that with other programs.
Thank you. Dan, please.
So, Mark, this was a humdinger of a way to start the day in the meeting. So thank you for that. It is really important work, and comforted to hear that you guys are approaching it the way that you are. It occurs to me, and this is beyond the scope of our work, but it occurs to me that this would be pretty interesting and valuable work and exercises, opportunities, frankly, for adults. And so I'm just curious about whether or not you make this available to adults, or if there might be a way to do that.
Yeah.
So maybe this building.
Phase 2 is offering this as corporate or government training.
Right.
And that's what the White House Decision Center does as well. So we just have to revise the module so that it can be done in a day as opposed to over essentially 4 60 to 80 minute periods. So that will probably be coming in 2012. We need to finish up the student modules first, and then that was our plan for phase 2. Because we've already had interest from local companies like TechSmith already want to be the pilot for that sort of training, so we're encouraged by that.
So I think just as a final comment, what I'm hearing is a compliment for taking on a tough issue with some advice and thought about how that might be improved a bit. And I know this was mainly a way to use this one as an illustration for what you're trying to continue to do in terms of... I teach a course in the spring on leadership, and I use the Kennedy Missile Crisis kind of as a way for people to put themselves in a spot, and how it wouldn't have taken a much different scenario. I was living in New York as a kid at the time, but you know, there's not a stretch on a scenario there to show that actually the nukes would be released,
right,
and that at least the East Coast would be gone. So, I mean, in that sense, I think what you're hearing is really thoughtful commentary on
And I
how
think
you
the
might-
decisions that are worth looking at are usually the hard ones. The ones that have lots of interpretive
Yeah.
points. And I mean, the Truman, they deal with dropping the atomic bomb. So
Right.
that's not very light material.
So I think you're hearing that, a compliment on taking on a tough issue and just some thoughtfulness about how we do this. So thanks so much. And, you know, we still need it. Flora and I had a kind of an email conversation yesterday, because to talk about race is very difficult. I bring it up in speeches once in a while, and in comments that I get feedback from conferences, it's often uncomfortable. People wonder why, and I'm bringing it up in a fairly non-controversial way, but people are just often uncomfortable. I think our conversation yesterday was about some of the recent goings-on at Michigan State right down the street that make us think at times we haven't made as much progress as we think. So the more that we can have, you know, appropriate conversations is I think, all going to be helpful. But thanks so much for taking the
I
time.
just have one thought that it might be helpful to do this with teachers before you do it with the students.
You mean run the program?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's what we actually...
I'm serious. That you use teachers as the first participants so that they know more about this.
We did use focus groups in the summer that were all teachers before we ran it through with students. And then there's just the practicality of getting 8 or more teachers together at one time during the school year, which is...
Yeah, I realize that, but maybe,
difficult.
you know, we could do it on Saturday for them or something. If they
Maybe even more difficult to get them to come in on a Saturday.
Well, Mark,
Thank you very much.
Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us today. Appreciate
Thanks so
your
much.
listening to some of the
Thanks,
thoughts.
Nancy.
Yeah, they do good work there.
You know, just a little more on, I asked for the item B to be withdrawn, and it's just a little bit more on that. It's because yesterday, when we were preparing for the meeting, Flora and John and some others gave me some information about some concerns that a meeting they were in, that they attended on Friday, had about the adoption of the Interstate Teacher Assessment and Support Consortium model, Core for Teaching Standards. So it's triggered some thinking in my mind, and I'm not comfortable with necessarily the recommendation we have right now. It may be the same in a month, but there isn't a time issue. And it did strike me that there may be some legitimate issues about the way we're thinking about technology in that. So I'd like to have a little more time for us to reassess as a team and then bring a recommendation to you. It may be the same one in a month, but it may be different. And actually, I think it'll be 2 months, because I think we're trying to tie it in with the dean meeting that we're having anyway to try to have a dialogue on this. And so we'll be back to you. Item C is the presentation on probationary approval of Baker College as a teacher prep institution. And I think Sally and Flora and Tom Bell are going to join us. And just kind of as a preamble, I'd like to say that after thorough review and on-site visits, a committee of scholars has concluded in the review of Baker College's teacher preparation program and is presenting this program for probationary approval. and we're recommending that, obviously, or it wouldn't be before you today, but this is ultimately a board decision. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sally, Flora, and Tom.
And as Mike said, this has been a significant process. As you know, it takes a number of years, and this one goes all the way back to June of 2001. But as Mike mentioned, they've gotten through the Committee of the Scholars. Visitations were in February of last year, and so we're ready to move forward with having you to consider moving them to that probationary status. So, Flora?
Thank you. Good morning. Probationary status for Baker College means that it would be able to recommend teacher preparation candidates on its own for certification. Right now, they are working with their mentor institution, which is Madonna, and they are going through Madonna for a recommendation. So we would like to go ahead and move them forward on the recommendation of the Committee of Scholars. So we are presenting this item to you, and then we'll come back next month for official approval. And Thomas Bell from our office has been working with Baker College and with the Committee of Scholars to get all of the work done that you see represented in this packet to bring this recommendation to you. So, Thomas, if you have any comments about the institution?
Yeah, real brief. I just want to take a moment to introduce some colleagues from Baker that are here today. We have the President and Chief Executive Officer, James Cummins, the System Vice President for Academics, Dr. Denise Bannon, the System Associate Vice President for Academics, Dr. Chris Schramm, and the System Director for EDU, Penny Aldrich. They've came in, the President today
Give
to
us
show
a
their
wave,
support.
so we'll...
And also from Madonna University, their mentor institution, which you'll see a letter of support. I believe it's attachment B, attachment D. Dr. Karen Opsnick, the Dean of the College of Education, and Dr. Rick Benedict, the Chair of Teacher Education at Madonna. The Committee of Scholars really was very impressed with Baker's approach. It's very unique in terms of what they offer their candidates. They have 7 different institutions, and one of the things that really stuck out to the committee was how they're able to ensure each candidate is prepared adequately and appropriately because they use a system strategy to designing their courses. And they have guidelines that go into developing each syllabi that every course must meet. And those are aligned to all the State Board of Education approved standards that we've put forth thus far. And they also exceed expectations in technology. They have a great deal of technology both in the content areas and in their teacher education unit. I was very impressed in our site visits and the candidates we met because they do get very excited about talking about their early and ongoing field experiences, which, as you know, has been a big push from our department in ensuring that candidates are getting out to the classroom early and often. They are required, they are ahead of the curve because they require all of their candidates to pass their subject knowledge MTTC test prior to student teaching. And this is a big thing as well because not all of our institutions do this. So if you have any questions, I look forward to answering any of those at this point. Thank you for taking the time to read through this girthy document. I'm sure it was great bedside reading.
What did you call it?
Girthy.
Girthy.
Yeah.
I
Thanks.
haven't heard that one.
Thanks, Tom, for your, that's a good message on some of what we were impressed with in this particular proposal. And board comments or questions, this would be back to you for approval next month, but this would be a good time to understand issues you may have. Nancy, please.
Nobody else has anything else. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the group in at least their fine presentation here of what's been done. I found this, actually, I liked going through all of this stuff, not just as bedtime reading material, but to actually delve into the depths of what it was that they've done. I was especially impressed with their effort to look at our least restrictive environment, our universal education, those kinds of things. I think I gleaned from what they said because it's hard, of course, in a chart to really say what you're thinking. But I think I gleaned from them that they're actually looking in not only diversity of culture and diversity of individual needs, but also in the kinds of needs, the kinds of assistance that needs to be present in the classroom, which I think oftentimes gets overlooked. You can sit and look at somebody and say, well, I really need to think carefully about how I present this material to them. But I think it's also important to make certain that the teacher recognize and have the ability to access
the kinds of assistive aids that certain kids need in order to do the learning that they're presenting in a different way. So I think it's both, and I was impressed with their ability to do this. One of the questions I did have is, they talk about their field experiences, and you mentioned how impressed you were with them, but I couldn't find what they were. And maybe I just didn't, not that it had to be here, I'm just curious. What
Tom.
kinds of field experiences do they have during the course of their work?
Tom?
The field experiences really vary within the content area. So depending on which program they're going through, so if it's math, in the level in which they're going through. So if it's elementary, they're going to get field experiences in K3, 3-6, and 6-8, and then in the content area in which they're majoring or minoring in.
I didn't ask the question right. Let me try and rephrase that, because clearly you answered what I asked, it just wasn't what I meant. What I'm trying to decide is how often during their 4 years of training.
You said early, Tom. I think that was...
Right.
So like every year that they're in school, they get some kind of field experience type of situation? Is that it?
Can I defer to Dr. Chris
Sure.
Schramm to give specifics? Because, like, as I said, I think each program might be a little different.
Okay.
Why
Why'd you go up?
don't you, come on up, please. And
We don't bite,
This is
even
a
though
former,
it's like
former MDE staff
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, it's nice. I'm sitting at the table.
Yeah.
We're glad to have you back.
Good to see you too. Good morning. In terms of field experiences, our students start with 20 hours in EDU 200, their intro class, 20 hours in EDU 312, their educational psychology class, 20 hours of field experience in EDU 330, which is the exceptional learner class. They also have another 20 hours in their reading and their content area class, 30 hours in their theory and techniques course, and that's all prior to student teaching. Plus they do some other projects within some of the courses that don't have field work.
How do you do that with 7 different campuses?
Very carefully. We have, and every campus has a dean, every campus has a full-time faculty member, every campus has a site coordinator that does the placements. So each campus, really, think about each campus as kind of a smaller college. And so within a campus, there's not a huge number of students, even though we have a pretty big program. Every campus in itself is smaller.
So you've got 7 different deans. How do you ensure consistency throughout programs?
Frequent meetings, both in person and we do a lot of meetings using technology as well. We communicate constantly through email. We feel like we're always right next door to each other. The deans are a very close-knit group. When we had the site visit at one campus, all the deans from all the campuses showed up. We have quarterly meetings of the deans at least, and frankly, because of so many other involvements, they probably meet 2 to 3 times in reality.
Okay. I have other questions, but I defer to some of my...
Richard?
This may have been buried in the report, so I apologize if this is redundant, but I was curious as to what percentage of your student, approximately how many students you have in the teaching program at this point?
Typically, I haven't looked at this fall's numbers. We just started the fall. Last fall's numbers were about 1,100 students across the system.
Okay. How many of those are full-time versus part-time students?
I'm not sure I'd know that. I could look that up and let you know. But the majority of our students are taking about 10 to 12 credits a quarter. So.
Do you know the approximate average age of your graduates when they're certified for teaching?
Our average age at entry is about 28.
Okay.
So across the system, so they'll obviously be a little bit older than that when they get done.
And what's the approximate length of time from the start of the program to graduation? Are these, if you're going part-time, I imagine, if you're going if you got maybe a year or two of college when you get into the program, and then you're going half-time or so, then I imagine maybe 4 to 6 years or something.
It's written as a 5-year program for full-time.
Okay.
So, and so some, obviously, if they're going part-time, would be a little bit longer than that.
Kath?
Can I ask Chris, the The 5-year program, does that mean the 5th year they have a full-time student teacher?
Pretty much. They do 2 quarters of student teaching. A student who's doing their student teaching in the fall will start when the school year starts for K-12, even though our quarters don't start till the end of September. They'll start at the beginning of the school year, so they see the opening of the school year, and they will go through the end of our winter quarter, which ends in mid-March. So it's about a 24 to 26-week student teaching experience. Those that do winter-spring student teaching would start student teaching actually in December. They'd go in and get introduced to the school prior to the holiday break, and then would go through the end of the school year. So it's really about a good half year of student teaching. More than a semester of school, not as long as a year long.
Okay, thanks.
Other comments or questions? Nance, and then Eileen.
In the section that you've submitted to us here, I think it's with all the charts. I don't know what you call that, but
A lot of stuff there.
in the chart talk, no. There's a whole section on what students have met from the guidelines and the requirements of the department. And starting on about page 42, we start seeing blanks that aren't filled in. The preparation program ensures that before individuals engage in student teaching, the individuals demonstrate from section 153(1)B, the revised school code. And then down the next page, State Board of Education guidelines, policies, and programs and recent legislative requirements are studied as part of the preparation program. Nothing. Can you help me understand why those portions of the school code pertaining to criminal activity, there's nothing listed there?
It's the items below it that actually fulfill the content of, that's the STEM, and then everything else is the what's addressed are the elements within that STEM below.
That's what I want to make sure. I was hoping
they met those guidelines. We just spelled it out a little bit more. Maybe it wasn't clear.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to be clear on that. And then the other thing, and again, maybe this is buried here and I just missed it, but I see a lot that are talking about assessments of the student teachers, that they're, how you assess them. What I don't see is what they learn about assessments in the classroom and how to use them. And so I'm looking for that. It's probably here, and I just haven't found it. Can you just talk to me about that, about what that is that they go through and learn?
Sure. They start in EDU 200 in their very first class learning about just the difference between formative and summative assessment. They talk about state assessment programs, NAEP, national assessment programs. We take that all the way through every course in Ed Psych. They talk about assessing given learning styles and things like that, different types of assessments, and the exceptional learner piece. They talk about how do you adapt assessments for exceptional learners. When they do their theory and techniques class, we talk about they have to do a whole unit plan, and assessment is one of the components of that plan. It has to be there, it has to be strong, it has to be aligned to state standards. And then in student teaching, that's a key piece of getting through student teaching. And then we actually have a wrap-up class, or we have our Educational Foundations class after student teaching, which reinforces this by, they took a look at things like MEAP data. How do you interpret it? What do you use it for in terms of decision making? How do you make plans? What doesn't it tell you? What does it tell you? So it's basically threaded throughout the program.
So you have chances not only to look at the summative assessments and how you would assess, or how you would use that data, but also the ongoing formative assessments. They have practice of doing that.
Absolutely.
That's, boy, I can't thank you enough for that. That's so there was one other thing, and I can't remember it right now, so I'm going to...
Eileen was next, and then Kat.
Excuse me, among others who I've met on the team besides Flora, Chris and Lois and I were all on the Professional Science Commission for Teachers together, so it's great to see you again. One of the things that the board is starting to grapple with is the ability of our teacher preparation programs to prepare teachers for digital learning, either online or blended instruction. All of the pieces, we don't have any changes in mind yet, but we're starting to wonder whether students can come from our teacher prep institutions and step into a different world 5 years from now and flourish. So you're coming in at just the right moment because we aren't there yet. But I do know from the conversations we've had in the past that it's part of how Baker approaches them. So hearing that formative assessment is part of what you're discussing, do you have any thoughts on whether your students could, in 3 or 5 years, teach comfortably in a blended instruction environment? And if so, what it is that you're doing that our ed schools should be looking at?
Well, I sure hope so. I hope they can do it now. We thread technology throughout the program in terms of, looking at things like, Dan Hoff mentioned earlier, adaptive technologies and things. We talk about that in classes. But we have one class that we highlight as kind of the class that's around technology. It's called, the old name was Instructional Media, and we changed the name, which is 21st Century Learning Skills, and preparing students for that. So it's a 4-credit class where they just immerse themselves in technology and everything that's new and great. We have them do online pieces. We have all of that as part of the program. So they have to come out knowing those pieces as it is. But it's not, to us, it's not just about the one class, because you can't do that in isolation, although they do a unit plan within that. They do teaching within that. It's not just learning about the technology, but how to use it, when to use it appropriately. So we actually look for that in student teaching as well, in their theory and techniques courses. So we need to make that. It just has to be threaded through everything, or it's not going to function.
Is there, and I don't mean to probe you on
Sure.
this, you're under a system that exists, and it's not really an issue. I'm looking for inspiration.
Sure.
But one of the questions that I have is that a number of communities in Michigan are moving to this Northwestern math and reading assessment that is a computer adaptive assessment. And I don't know of other assessments that exist like that. Of course, it's proprietary. But is there ever an opportunity within what Baker does to teach your candidates how to use it, or is that sort of thing just an extension of the philosophy that you're already teaching?
I think the opportunity is clearly there to do it. My background is testing and assessment, so adaptive testing is kind of it's here now. It's not even a wave of the future. It's here. We need to work with it. And so, yeah, implementing something like that in the classroom should be relatively simple. These are, at Baker, one of the tests we use for student placement is an adaptive test. So our students have to take one. We could certainly use that even as a basis for how do you interpret the results, what kind of decisions do you make. So it would be easy enough to do.
Thanks.
Thanks, Eileen. Kath and
Yeah, I
Marianne.
just wanted to check, and I don't know if I can hear that. We have been talking about we shouldn't be preparing so many teachers for elementary school. We need a lot more teachers in math and science. What is your percentage of students who are training to be elementary school teachers? And have you done recruiting, or how do you do that to get people to want to teach math and science?
Well, it's something that I think everybody struggles with. Our program is, our students are typically about 2/3 elementary, 1/3 secondary. We wish it were the reverse. We try to promote that as obviously where there are more jobs where we want to be. We do have a pretty strong elementary mathematics. We have math majors at elementary. We have pretty strong, pretty decent number of graduates. I think somewhere around 20 of our 97 graduates last year were from that area. We are in the process. We have some decent numbers at secondary math. We'd like to grow that. We have just recently added a biology minor at the secondary level. We already have a chemistry minor, and we are in the process this year of looking at adding integrated science both at the elementary and secondary level. So that's something we'd really like to push into. So we're building the infrastructure for that.
Marianne and Dan and Eileen. I'm sorry,
Hi,
and
Chris.
Nancy.
I can see Baker College is in good hands
Thank you.
with you there. I was just wondering, what is the percentage of those who start versus those who graduate?
Depends on how you define it. If we talk about people who walk right in the door and say they want to be teachers, a good 25 to 30% decide after 1 to 2 quarters that that's not really what they want to do. And we don't mind that simply because we want people to be in the right careers. Once they're formally admitted to our program, it's well above 90, in the high, probably in the mid to high 90% that complete. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a problem with those who drop out with regards to any student loans or anything of that sort?
Sure. I mean, I think that's true for everybody, and every institution would tell you that we try to make sure that we get people, you know, one of the things we try to do is say, oh, if education's not for you, because we are a career institution, what other kind of careers do we offer that we can get you an education and get you a career?
Thank you, Mary Ann. Dan?
A couple of questions actually for Flora and team. One is, I can't find it now, but my recollection is that the passage rates for students coming out of the program for the MTCC was like 84%?
Yes.
84.6.
So I couldn't put my hands on, I know we had a document sometime the last year that actually gave us passing rates for all the institutions in Michigan. How does that compare to, I know it's a good rate, what's the, just how does it exactly compare?
What would be the average rate?
Well, we don't have, the performance, Baker is not part of our performance score because they're a part of Madonna's. Madonna is in the exemplary category, which is the highest you can get. So their numbers are rolled into there, so I can only guess that they're a part of that process as well.
Probably had. I mean, if you look at the distribution, and I don't have that document in here in our teacher preparation performance score, and we probably had about, I'd say, a third of the institutions that were in the exemplary. So, you know, and that's why if we move them to their own, to the probationary status, then we'd be able to get their own score.
Right. Second, three quick questions, I think. So second is what's the department's greatest concern, if any, I mean, at this point? So I imagine you guys have had, you know, years, obviously, of frank conversation around this. So we got the kind of highlights in the presentation, really pleased with A, B, and C. What's the one thing that, you know, had you guys concerned, if at all?
And I'll let Thomas speak to that because he's worked with that committee of scholars.
The biggest concern from the committee of scholars had to do with the faculty. Baker uses a business model for, that's the best way I can put it. They do not have many full-time faculty. They use a lot of adjuncts for both their content courses and their education courses. Now, if Baker had only been through the process for 3 years, I can see that concern because some of the concern was how do they continue to do it? How are they going to evolve? Well, they've been in the process for 10 years, and they're getting better. So that's why the committee has moved to say, okay, well, it might just not fit in our paradigm of understanding how higher ed works. We need to shift out of that, and maybe this is a model that is feasible. And I think as long as they're able to continue to collect data, and this is feedback that I've given Chris when they go through their program approvals, if you're able to collect data to show that your candidates are still learning and your assessments are matching that, then through the accreditation process, that will also be validated as well. So I think that's one of the issues. Another issue also had to do with faculty research, but again, that's at a traditional institution. And they still have professional development. They still ask their faculty to utilize grant opportunities and offer those opportunities for both adjuncts and full-time faculty. But the system and the structure of the institution is just very different. And so that is not necessarily a concern. It's just something to recognize, I think, as a challenge they will have to continue to answer to as they go through this process.
Dan, if I could kind of answer that also, when I looked at this, it's tied into the inference of your question. It's not a concern about Baker, but I thought I was going to say this to the end, but I thought it might connect. One concern I have is we're almost more thoughtful about this for obvious reasons when we're in the approval process. And one thing I thought was very helpful today, and will continue to be with more questions, is that we're almost getting a tutorial from you on what are issues that we should be ready for as we re-up folks. Because I think, candidly, in the system, part of our problem is that once you're in, you're pretty much in. I mean, and I think that needs to change. I think we need to have cutting-edge programs wherever they are. And I think one of the beauties of having new folks on the block is that it's kind of, as Tom said, it starts to stretch your thinking about, what is it we really need for today's teacher ed. And this isn't meant to be negative about the other 32 that are already in place. It's just because they're happy to be part of a more relevancy system of teacher ed. But I think, so that's my concern, is kind of that we sometimes have a way to be more thoughtful about that with the new ones and less thoughtful about that with the existing ones. And then, but as I want to compliment the board, because I think we'll probably review this tape when we're done. I think inferred in here are a lot of good and thoughtful questions about what we should be looking at for renewal also. You had a third one, I think.
I did. Thank you. So, quick question for our representative from Baker College, who I've not met before, but it's a pleasure to meet you. So, in the spirit of Mike's comment, I really feel like our teacher preparation institutions have to be in, I don't want to call it constant, but we're certainly in constant improvement mode, right? And so so you guys have been in that mode for some time. What's next? What do you want to beef up that you're not doing? You don't feel like you're doing well enough now, or what do you want to eliminate that you feel like is not necessary any longer, that kind of thing?
Well, several things. I mean, we'd really like to move into special education. We're not offering anything in that arena right now. We believe we can make a contribution there. We have an incredibly strong online program that we have not yet utilized in higher education at all. So we need to figure out how to marry those two, either through master's programs or other continuing ed, or even undergraduate programs. We'd like to think differently about that. And then it's really a matter for us to sit down and brainstorm where we want to go once we have a little bit more freedom to do what we want to do. Although, frankly, Madonna's been a terrific mentor for us. So I don't know that there's anything negative that I want to throw out immediately. I think it's a matter of sitting down and saying what's working really well and how do we want to be known and who do we want to be known as.
I've lost track. Kath, I think you were next.
One of the things that we've had some concerns about over the years that we've tried to look at and improve is to have student-teacher candidates be more culturally aware, and how do they deal with youngsters of different backgrounds from their own, and very varied backgrounds now.
Absolutely.
Is that included in the? It's in here someplace.
Yeah, it's absolutely. We try to make sure that our students, as we talked about those various classes and the different 20 hours of field work all the way across, that they have an urban experience, that they have a rural experience, as much as we can with our campuses, and many of them do allow for us to have those kind of placements. So we try to make sure that students have, prior to student teaching, those kind of placements, and then obviously within student teaching they could be placed in a situation as well. But we look at that is definitely something that we're very aware that they need to know how to teach to all learners, and all means all.
And what is your student population itself like? Is it diverse?
It is. I looked at the numbers the other day. It's probably, I think we started at about 11-12% minority, and that seems to be actually bumped up a bit. We're up to about 15% across the system. We'd like to see that grow as well. We have a specific program on our Flint campus that recruits minority males that we support. It's a consortium with Mott and UM Flint that we're involved with, and that's been very successful for us. We have some incredible candidates in that program.
Oh, that's good to know.
I have some data. 6% to 26% underrepresented student populations are in the teacher ed program throughout the 7 campuses. So that kind of, there's a big variety depending on which campus you visit, but overall I would say the mean is probably 15%, 15 to 10.
I think it was Nancy, then Paul, then Eileen.
In your overview at the beginning, before you get to all the charts, you talk about, upon receipt of probationary approval, Baker College will complete all stipulations prior to making applications for full approval, as well as And you list some things that I'm a little curious about, because quite frankly, I would have thought you would have, with all the years that you've been doing this is on page 11, I'm sorry, 11 and 12, you would have already done these things, that you meet all state code and SBE policy requirements, you meet all state requirements for the unit, utilize a variety of assessment instruments to evaluate, utilize assessment data for continuous program improvement, and adhere to appropriate sections from the program evaluation process. I'm not quite sure what 5 means, but why would you just now, why would it be after approval that you would complete this? Why wouldn't you have completed it before?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
When Baker started in 2001, they were upheld to certain requirements that are outdated. And because of the way the process has been worked out with our office and with the department, they still only have to meet those minimum standards. However, they have gone above and beyond, and they are meeting currently our professional standards for Michigan teachers. They've been reviewed against those expectations. I think this is just a good faith statement from my perspective to say that they will continue to do that and show alignment to any new policies or procedures that continue to come out of our department.
I would recommend that for your own help, that you not put it in the terms of you will complete, but rather you will continue to adhere to. Because it's misleading, I think, to say that you it sounds like you haven't done these things yet.
No.
And yet everything I read here, it looks like you have done them.
Yeah, you're right.
So, and then I'm just going to say one more thing for our department that has been a big concern of mine. I think that we are not serving well these teacher institutions who either want to re-up or who are wanting to become fully compliant and part of the group by only looking at them in terms of what they had to meet, the levels they had to meet based on when they started. Today is today, and they're teaching students for today, not what was 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 4 years ago. And I think it's important, it's incumbent upon us to have those standards for what happens today be relevant, and not look at the letter of the law that, well, we started under this, so I guess you don't have to do that. The last time we had a group come before us, I had a real problem with that too. I thought, well, okay, so when you first started this, that wasn't required, but it is now. You mean you get all these years to make up for that, and the students you graduate don't have to do that, and they get out in the field and then they're not prepared? That's not right either. So I would just encourage you to look at what today's requirements are, not what they started under. And even though you have to judge them under what they started under, have the pieces in place to say, and how are they reaching for today?
Yeah, we can take
So
Okay.
that's one of my major concerns.
Thank you. I think it was Paul, Paul and then Eileen.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful when you take a look at the number of hours that they do prior to student teaching. I think that that's very, very important. I'd like to see that, obviously within the model. I want to follow up on what Dan had indicated about looking at your future. Have you looked at possibilities and opportunities for an international student teaching experience for your students? I was afforded that when I attended Central way back when. And I think it's... Yeah, that's right. Just a couple of years ago. But I think it's invaluable as we look at that, if the students are able to, obviously there's a cost associated with doing all of that, but we talk about, global perspectives or, ideas and concepts, and, people only know what they know. And so when a student is able to do that, could you maybe respond to that? Is that something on the radar that might play into teacher preparation?
Boy, I wish it were, but I honestly can't say it is on our radar. Our student population is, they're older. They often are trying to juggle families and jobs. I'm not sure that quite fits with who we are as an institution.
Sure, fair enough.
Flora or Tom, do you have a sense, I think it's a really good point, do you have a sense of our 32, how many maybe have that opportunity?
I don't know how many offer the specific student teaching internationally. I know Central does, and I know MSU has a wide variety of international programs that students can attend, and I'm sure that across the various universities, public institutions, that they do that. but I don't have a specific, and maybe that's something we could research.
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you.
That-
Eileen?
It's an interesting point.
Please.
When my granddaughter was getting her master's in teaching at University of Minnesota, she spent a semester in Vietnam teaching a high school class in Vietnam. And I had never heard of that before. I thought, that's really building a field. It's really valuable, I think.
If you have a video of that, we'll show it at the beginning of next meeting. Granddaughter stuff's good
I
here.
mean, I have granddaughters, too.
Eileen, please.
I now have 3 points with which to challenge Dr. Schramm, but following up on that, to me, for Michigan teachers, the most important student teaching experience is in a wide range of classrooms. So I wondered first if you could tell us whether that's an opportunity that Baker College students have.
Yes, particularly secondary students, because they have to student teach in both their major and their minor, so they're going to go into different classrooms. In elementary, if we can get them into a couple of different levels, we will.
When you say levels, I'm thinking back to PSTT,
Yeah.
and I'm looking at children at risk, as something that's a really valuable learning experience, especially for things like formative assessment. Do you, for your placements, do your students actually see a wide range of types of student learners and different kinds of classrooms, urban, rural?
They do in their early field experiences. Their student teaching placement tends to be in one building. And within that building, they may move around at different grade levels, but that's,
And then the second thing I just wanted to point out is that in their website, they have both the MTTC pass rate and the Praxis pass rate. And it's interesting because the cumulative is about 6 points higher on our test than it is on Praxis. I've always wondered, what it would be like if we went to Praxis. Their cumulative pass rate through this is not through 2010. It's a little bit earlier than that, but it's 89.56% on ours and 83.21 on the Praxis, just for internal consumption for the board and the department. And then the last thing I'd like to say is that, as we torture Baker College here with all of our goals for everybody that we haven't ever stated, Baker has a history as an online instruction institution. We have an online requirement for high school instruction. If Baker can't integrate teacher prep with online, then nobody can. But I'm curious as to how you do it, because it seems to me, as we look forward, that we should be telling institutions they need to make sure their students have experienced an online course, just like the high school kids.
They actually have it in here in their training.
Well, the requirements. Chris was saying that you
we
don't
haven't done it like
integrate right now.
full courses and full programs online, but within that technology course, they have to do an online experience. An awful lot of our early childhood courses are hybrid courses where they're doing part work online, and in fact, any of our courses can be hybrid, where they do certain things through online experiences. So it's not like we haven't put it within coursework, but it's not, I would say, consistent for all students in all classes, and we haven't certainly put a whole program online yet.
Thank you, I think, right? Didn't miss the last question. I think we're good. And we would bring it back in November. Appreciate, as I said, I'd say it may be a little crisper, that I think this is really going to be a good tutorial almost for us to expose all the deans to the issues that you've raised as a board, so that they start to think about those things, but also so that we start to incorporate it. I think a lot of this we do incorporate with what Tom does on the visit, but I think there's nuances here that are good, useful, and new. And I think maybe minimally at the meeting I'm having in November with them, we'll review that. I think that's a good way to go. Thank you for the thoughtful conversation. Thank you, Tom, Flora,
Nice to see you,
Chris.
Chris.